Hey guys, it's me, Amaterasu, back with another part 2, all for some, aka, what if Deku was a villain? But without further ado, roll the intro.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
My wheels got in my bag and I got all my feels. I'm getting this paper, I'm stacking a meal. I'm with your hoe in the house on the hills. Yeah. I'ma keep it real, had to sacrifice to try to get my bands up. Shorty wanna fuck with me, she see me on the camera. She said she in love with me, but really I can't stand her. She just want part of this life cause she see me on the ground.
Chapter 14. Friends. Izuku barely had the strength to lift his foot over the doorstep as he dragged himself and Shinso into his house, with Shinso being in an even less functional state. At least Ida got all the way back on his own 2 feet. Even the speedster was too tired to walk without dragging his feet. You know Midoriya? Shinso started. I'm starting to suspect you don't want me to go to UA. Izuku froze and stared at his friend only to witness a devious, though tired, grin. Why else would you try to kill me with training before the entrance exams? Hey, if you survive, the exam will feel like a vacation. If? Both of them chuckled, Shinso a bit more nervously than Izuku. As all of them were practically dripping sweat, they headed down to the spa, dropping their bags and clothes at the dressing room. There was a whole Japanese bath and a heated pool that was like a hot spring, just what they needed. Izuku spread his arms and unceremoniously fell in the pool. Careful, even if we're tired, we cannot forget basic pool safety, Ida said in his usual lecturing voice, though even that had lost steam. Still laying on the water, Izuku turned around so he could breathe and respond. My pool, my rules. Shinso chuckled and slid down to the water nearby. He went completely lax as soon as the water reached his neck and there was no need to go anywhere anymore. I won't leave here before tomorrow. I would agree, but we were supposed to have a movie night, Izuku responded. Oh right, I may not have a choice though. I'm not sure I'm even able to get up anymore. Somehow you managed to help me find new muscles to hurt every weekend. Izuku hummed in recognition of Shinso's words, remembering entire school days of pain before regeneration. Now he was just exhausted and recovering faster from that too, but could still sympathize. It is unavoidable, he lied and settled to a half-sitting position near Shinso. That is how you know the training works. You would know. Shinso poked at Izuku's arm that showed the results from over 8 months of training, several of those without needing to worry about injury or recovery time. I still got a long way to catch up. Izuku jolted at the poke but relaxed again quickly. You have no idea. At least you got this place. I already feel a lot better. Who do I need to brainwash to get a pool like this? Ida opened his mouth to say something, but Izuku was faster and laughed at the comment. Soon Ida too started smiling. Shinso looked at him and his grin turned into a softer smile. Usually, I can't make jokes like that around people. Maybe I should take their quirks, Izuku said, his expression completely serious. Shinso stared at him and blinked. Izuku returned a smile to his face and continued. I can't make those jokes either. You should have seen your face. Shinso splashed water in Izuku's face. Izuku responded in kind. Soon both were splashing like little kids, like they never got the chance to do enough of before. Surprisingly, Ida didn't reproach them for such childish behavior. Their stamina didn't last long anyway, as both remembered how exhausted they were. Izuku leaned back, breathing a bit harder than before but with a content smile on his face. Glad to see you are enjoying the pool, he told Shinso. I do a lot, though it makes me feel sorrier that I don't have any way to pay back everything you have done. The pool time is the least of it. Honestly, you already have, Izuku said. This house is way too big for me. Usually it just feels empty and cold, hot pool or not, but at times like this I love it. No one ever told me how fun it is to have friends over ... and quat. Mumbling under his breath he muttered, or to have friends at all, for that matter. You, haven't had friends before? Ida asked. You didn't realize that before? Izuku asked and turned to look at the ceiling. I haven't had a real friend, at least not anyone my age, since I was 4 or 5. There was this one teacher in my old school who was the closest friend I had. He is the one I could talk to when the bullying got too bad. We still keep in touch. Other than him and family, I've been alone for a decade. That sounds like an excellent teacher, truly worthy of being called sensei, Ida said and paused for a moment before continuing in a more serious tone. How are you feeling now? About being lonely, that is. Right now, I can barely remember how it felt, he said with a content smile and tilted his head to look at Shinso. So don't worry about being trouble and instead go check the mini fridge. He nodded to the small fridge next to the pool. Shinso waddled to it to check the contents. Nice, you want anything? He asked. Just sparkling water, Izuku said. I'll have the same please, Ida requested politely. We should avoid unhealthy drinks so as to be at our best during the entrance exams. Good idea, Shinso agreed as he came back with drinks and looked at Izuku. Is there anything else you need? You two in same school when people find out about my quirk. I could say the same, Shinso responded. They were all quiet for a moment. I am sure if we continue training this intensely, it will happen. If the exams are worth anything, Izuku said, his smile threatening to slip back to a straight line. His line of thought was cut off as Shinso splashed water on his face again. Once Izuku brushed the water off his eyes, he could see the other's blank expression. We should leave that discussion for training time. Sure, Izuku agreed. Wake me up when you get hungry. Truth to be told, I have felt increasingly hungry for the past hour, Ida said. We shouldn't leave dinner for too late. You don't want to eat heavily just before going to sleep. That is probably for the best, Izuku said. I got a personal goal to make Shinso sleep for at least 8 hours. Good luck with that, Shinso muttered. I won't give up until I do it, Izuku promised, determination in his eyes. Don't even think about touching the coffee before morning. They stared for a moment until their self-control failed and both started chuckling. Eventually Izuku pulled himself to the edge of the pool. I'll go order the food. There's a nice sushi place I get food from often. He went back to where he had dropped his clothes. Getting out of the warm pool was not pleasant, but at least the house felt warmer than usually. He dug his phone from his bag, opened one of the several food ordering apps and ordered a giant sushi collection meant for 10. Smiling, he went back to sit in the pool. It's going to be at least half an hour, probably more. Make sure to wash before then. They finished bathing just in time and were just coming out of the spa area in bathrobes when the food was delivered. Shinso sometimes jolted from sudden pains as he walked, but other than that they were enjoying themselves. Both Ida's and Shinso's jaws dropped as Izuku placed the literal piles of high-quality sushi on the large table. I doubt we can eat all of this, Ida said. At least there isn't a risk of going to bed hungry, Izuku shrugged. You can say that again. I have never seen this much sushi in one place. That must have cost a small fortune. Worth every yen, Izuku declared smiling. To see your faces. Have to do this again with a camera. Izuku sat down and despite the size of the table, Shinso and Ida picked the seats right next to him. Izuku leaned back on his chair as the two started picking sushi, talking about which were their favorites. Totally worth it, he muttered. Eventually he too started eating, but they all started getting full with almost half of the food still left. Izuku looked at the entire plates of uneaten food. I guess you were right, Ida. We couldn't finish it. I usually only order single portions. Midoriya, I don't want to intrude with your private life, but how much of the food you eat is delivery? A lot, Izuku said. I cook sometimes, but I'm not really good at it. Mom used to make all our food. She loved cooking. I have never found anything as good as her katsudon. Izuku quieted to swallow and hold back tears. So, your father doesn't cook for you? You should have noticed by now. He doesn't spend that much time here, usually just quick visits anytime his work permits. Does he have a problem with your quirk too? Shinso asked. What? Izuku spun to face Shinso. No, Dad has been the most supportive person with my quirk and after the kidnapping attempt, he helped me get past it and control the dragon blade I got then. He never even questioned me for taking it. That's good, Shinso said and turned to pick one more piece of sushi. Still seems wrong he leaves you to live so alone. All the times we have already been here we have never even seen the man, Ida said. He has done everything he can for me, Izuku said in a barely controlled tone, while recalling the correct lies to say, as much as he hated doing that to these two. Sure, he can't stay home much, but that's how we have a home at all, and he gets back whenever he can. Sometimes I go to Tokyo because he flies all the way back for such short amount of time it doesn't make sense to come from the airport all the way here. You should understand, Ida. Aren't most people in your family pro-heroes? They are probably busy and have to go with the demands of their jobs first. Some jobs don't fit well with a family. As expected, pointing to Ida's own family stopped the taller teen from responding despite looking like he really wanted to. Izuku turned to face the food, somber expression on his face. My family situation might not be perfect, but it isn't something you should worry about. My real problems have always come from people outside my family. Look at what you did, Ida. Now he is sad again, Shinso commented. Oh no, I apologize. It was not my intention. I merely wanted to express the same concern for your well-being you regularly show us. Even without looking, Izuku could feel Ida swinging his arm like a robot next to his head. With Ida's words he got some of his smile back. He gestured at the food. How about we carry the rest of this to the living room and start the movie? They didn't make it to the large sofa before Izuku's phone started ringing where they had left their bags after the bath. Wordlessly Shinso took the plate Izuku was carrying so he could go get the phone. He froze, recognizing the caller number as his father. Had something happened? His father knew he was with Shinso and Ida right now. Hesitantly Izuku answered and brought the phone to his ear. He made sure to talk excitedly. Hey, Dad. Izuku held back from wincing as both Ida's and Shinso's heads perked up. Good evening, son. How was your training today? Good. We trained till we could barely walk back. I just finished having dinner with Shinso and Idaho, right? You know, as your father I should know them. If they are there you should let me talk with them. Are you sure? Izuku asked quietly after turning his back to his two guests, not wanting them to hear his concern. Of course, I should be interested in who my son brings home, even if it is not girls yet. Dad, Izuku said, making a good impression of a whiny teenager without even acting. He could hear a small chuckle from his father. Take the phone to them and put me on speaker or you don't get to spend time with Kurogiri for a week. Izuku spun around and headed to the sofa. Guys, my father wants to talk with you. And quat. He placed his phone on the table next to their remaining sushi and put it on the speaker. You're on speaker, Izuku said and stepped back from the phone so his hero hopeful friends could talk with the most prominent villain since Quirks appeared. If he showed any nervousness, he hoped Shinso and Ida just thought he was nervous at them talking with his father for the first time. Thank you, Izuku. Good evening, Ida and Shinso, I believe? Yes, sir. I am Tenya Ida. It is an honor to talk with you, Ida said with his usual formality and loudness. I'm Hitoshi Shinso, Shinso said in calmer, more neutral tone, though it was missing some of the tiredness that usually characterized him. Interesting, came from the other end of the line. Even if you did not say your names, I would have known which was which from your voice and how Izuku described you. I'm sure it's because of how detailed descriptions he gave, or maybe he wrote full notebooks on us, Shinso said. Izuku's father laughed at that. You are truly friends of Izuku, and for that you have my gratitude. He has always had a shine of positivity despite the difficulties of his life. I feared he lost it for good with his mother, but it returned brighter than ever as soon as he started talking about you two as his friends. Ida brushed his chin, seemingly deep in thought. I fear I cannot claim the honor for that. I saw what you are talking about after he joined my class, but never could change that even after months. It was only after we met Shinso that I have seen him smiling regularly. Do not understate your importance. You were willing to stick around for months and try to be his friend even when he wasn't yet ready for it. Their similar experiences might have brought Izuku closer to Shinso faster, but you showed him that he can count on someone of his age at least. For that you are always welcome at my house. Well, I suppose it's Izuku's house mostly. And speaking of Shinso, and his quirk. Izuku tensed and stepped closer to his indigo-haired friend, who had also tensed. Your quirk is amazing. So much potential. I wish I could observe it myself, but I would be happy if you could overcome other people's prejudices enough to show Izuku. I'm sure he would come up with even more ways to improve your use of it. Even more? Shinso asked, emphasizing the even part. Izuku turned to face away and after a few seconds walked to his backpack. He pulled out a notebook and returned to the sofa. Shinso and Ida had settled to the ends of the sofa so Izuku sat in between them with the notebook on his lap. Shinso leaned over to take a closer look. Friend analysis to help them improve part 1, he read out loud. You've really been taking notes about us? Of course he has, his father said from the phone. He is also extremely protective of that notebook specifically. Hasn't even let his own father read it. Every child needs their private treasure, I guess. Dad, Izuku begged as he seemed to shrink into the sofa. Fine. It sounds like everything is fine there. Don't stay up too late and you two make sure Izuku goes to sleep smiling. We will do our best, sir, Ida declared. Izuku quickly picked up the phone. Good morning, Dad. Sleep well, son. Izuku ended the call and sat in silence for a moment. So, Shinso said, you have a whole notebook on us. Yes, Izuku admitted. It is kind of a habit to take notes on people and their quirks. At first I just made small notes on my regular notebook. Then we started training together and I started taking notes about that and needed more space. Some of the notes are kind of personal so I haven't shown it to anyone else. Are you going to let us see what you have written? Izuku stared at the notebook for a moment, then held it in front of Shinso. Shinso raised his hand but hesitated. Take it. It is about you, Izuku said. He dropped the notebook on Shinso's lap and reached for the remote to get the movie night started. Shinso opened the notebook. I didn't think of that, though that doesn't work, Shinso mumbled and skipped to another page. Both Izuku and Ida glanced at him as Izuku tried to remember everything he had written. Is something wrong? Ida asked. Shinso leaned his head from side to side and thought. Nothing we haven't talked about today already. This is basically just a Midoriya is happy to have friends and not hide his quirk page. Next to the reasons to be friends with each of us pages. His father wasn't wrong about you. Always there, didn't turn on me because of group pressure, lectures too much but only for things I do not how I am. That part is underlined. Should I go on? I don't think that is necessary, Ida responded as Izuku kept sinking into the sofa. Shinso inched to sit a bit closer to Izuku and switched the notebook for the remote. Just as he was about to press play, he turned to stare at Izuku. We are going to talk about how my quirk works tomorrow. Before Izuku could agree, Shinso's focus returned to the screen, and he started the movie. A loud orchestral opening started playing from the sound system as text explaining the setup of the movie flowed across space. Sometime later the hero left his destroyed home with an old mentor and arrived in a shady town with soldiers waiting. The mentor simply waved his hand and used his power to control the soldiers' mind, and they were allowed to pass despite having just what the soldiers were searching for. See, brainwashing can be really useful for doing good, Izuku said. Right, Shinso muttered. Did you pick the movie for this? I also like it. It's a classic. So you did, Shinso said and looked away while holding one hand against the back of his neck. Just saying, I know who I want with me if I ever run into a roadblock, Izuku said and looked at the screen again. I wonder how it feels to them. Huh? To be brainwashed like that. Or by your quirk. You know you'll need to use it on me if you want me to figure how to properly help you. Maybe, but and quat. Shinso muttered, staring at Izuku, stunned and maybe a little afraid. Are you sure? You'd be at my quirk's mercy. Shinso, Izuku looked up at his friend. I'll let you stay overnight in my house with a kitchen full of knives and will probably fall asleep before you do. I'm not worried that you would abuse your quirk while we are all awake and together. Forget anything anyone else has said about it. You'll never become a hero if you let people like that hold you back. Shinso still hesitated, but Izuku was already subjecting the brainwasher to his pleading friend eyes, so Shinso had no chance to refuse. Yeah, you're right, Shinso admitted and drew a deep breath. Do you really want me to brainwash you? Yes, I and quat. Izuku fell silent mid-sentence. He was still conscious, sort of, but everything was foggy and unclear, like his very mind was full of fog. Someone's head leaned in front of him and then something moved back and forth in front of his eyes. People were talking but he couldn't quite make out the words. Suddenly his hand moved and flicked his forehead with a finger. The world cleared in an instant. Izuku blinked. That, he gasped, was really strange. Sorry, Shinso said, but you. Don't apologize, Izuku intervened. I didn't say it was bad, and yes, I asked for it. The next moment the friend notebook was open and a pen appeared in Izuku's hand. The movie forgotten. He started scribbling notes to record the experience while it was still fresh in his mind. Everything else around him hardly existed. For the record, I didn't make him do this, Shinso's voice said somewhere. Don't worry, this happened occasionally before we even met you. Both of them leaned over Izuku to see what he was writing, closing Izuku between them as their bodies brushed against him. For someone that most people had either dismissed or avoided aggressively for most of his life, the sensation was new and welcome one. Eventually he stopped writing and they finished watching the movie. We should go to sleep now so we are sharp tomorrow, Ida declared. Izuku collected the plates, still some sushi on them, and headed for the kitchen. Ida and Shinso leaned down to open the sofa as a bed. Izuku turned around. You don't need to do that. I've gotten something better since last week. Because of course you did, Shinso said, and the two followed Izuku after taking away the plates. He led them upstairs to one of the formerly empty large bedrooms. What had his father even been thinking when he picked the house? There was just too much of nothing with only echoes to keep Izuku company, usually. As he pulled open the door, he was thankful for one more room to fill with 3 more beds, not just beds but wide high-quality beds arranged with their head ends spreading out from a low triangular table in the middle of it all. Izuku turned around and gestured the duo to enter. Welcome to the sleepover room. No sofas or floors for my friends. You never cease to surprise me, Shinso said as he stepped in and held the back of his neck in a familiar gesture. So we are all going to sleep in here? If you are okay with it, Izuku responded. You can use my room if you want to be alone. No, I'll be okay as long as you don't snore. Izuku nodded with a smile on his face and turned to Idaho. How about you? Of course I will not refuse your generous effort to make us comfortable and strengthen the bonds of our friendship. Though I have to say your efforts are more than anyone could reasonably expect from you. You should not feel pressured to put such effort into our friendships. True, Shinso said, we aren't your friends to get sushi or a good night's sleep. Well, the latter would be nice if you managed to pull it off. Shinso, Ida remarked, but the indigo-haired teen just shrugged. I'm just telling the truth. Friends shouldn't lie to each other. Izuku froze in place, suddenly feeling terrible. Friends didn't lie to each other, so could Izuku ever be a true friend to them? Tears glinted in his eyes, about to burst out. Both Ida and Shinso stared at him. I swear it's not me, Shinso said. Ida didn't have time to comment as Izuku moved forward between them and brought his arms around them. Oh, they said in unison, misunderstanding Izuku's reaction at least partially. Nevertheless, they accepted the gesture. Slowly Izuku's breathing calmed. He stood back and turned away from the two. Sorry, that was embarrassing. I don't know, Shinso said. It was kind of nice. Anyway, we should get ready to sleep so I can keep my promise to you, Izuku said, still facing away. I won't hesitate to withhold morning coffee if you take too long. Quick footsteps moved to the adjacent bathroom. A few seconds later they came back and Shinso pulled his toothbrush and pajamas from his backpack before leaving again just as fast. Izuku and Ida chuckled. I don't usually support blackmail, but ... and quat. Ida started. It is for a good cause, Izuku finished, still lacking the cheerfulness he should have had. They followed Shinso together to the bathroom and soon got to the beds. Izuku loved going to sleep with fresh clean sheets after bathing. With friends it was infinitely better. He turned off the lights and got onto the last free bed. He turned on his side to face Shinso. Feeling like sleeping yet? No, Shinso sighed. I feel more awake than when we left the bath. Sleeping difficulties are truly a nuisance, Ida commented. My brother often misses sleep, though that is just because of his work. Unfortunately, humans cannot simply order themselves to sleep. Izuku's head perked up as Ida's words sunk in. Maybe we can, he said. Shinso, can you use your brainwashing to order someone to sleep? Well, maybe. I have not tried to use it like that. It might not, since people can't normally choose to fall asleep, but I don't completely understand all of the limits of my quirk. Don't worry, Izuku assured, got back to sitting position. We are going to figure them out starting with this, but for that. Izuku fell silent and looked down, rubbing his hands together. Can I borrow your quirk? What? Shinso and Ida asked at the same time. I understand if you don't want to. I just thought if it can make people fall asleep I could borrow it and use it on you. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked just like that. Do it, Shinso said. Izuku blinked. Are you sure? You trusted me enough to let me in your house and willingly let me brainwash you before. I think I can trust you with my quirk, Shinso said. Full night's sleep would be nice too. Okay, Izuku said and breathed in deep. I have only done this a few times, but it shouldn't hurt. Probably better if you stay relaxed. Izuku reached out with his hand and put it on Shinso's head, amazed as he just lied down relaxed, head on his pillow. He didn't even flinch as Izuku's quirk-taking hand pressed against his head. Izuku focused on his all-for-one, seeking out the quirk within his friend and pulling it away, as gently as he could. A moment later he pulled his hand away, feeling the new sensation deep within himself, but ignored it in favor of his friend. How are you feeling? Izuku asked. Strange. I want to say I don't feel anything different, but there is this vague sensation that everything isn't right. Can you respond to me? Of course, Izuku said. Shinso stared at him for a long moment before turning his head to look at the ceiling again. You really took it away. It's strange. For most of my life I wished I could get rid of my quirk. Now I actually feel like I've lost something. Not lost, Izuku assured and brought a hand to his chest. Just loaned to a friend. It is still right here. Want to tell me how to use it? It's simple. You have to focus on the person you want to brainwash while you are talking to them. If you get a response, there is this feeling and you only need to pull on it. You have to be quick. The moment only lasts for an instant when the target starts responding. Okay, Izuku responded and focused on Shinso with all the effort his tired brain could muster. Can I make you sleep? Yes, Shinso responded. They were quiet for a moment before he turned his head to look at Izuku again. You missed it. I felt it, but couldn't grasp it in time, Izuku said. Can I try again? Sure. It took many more tries, but then on one try Izuku could feel something snap the instant his mind reached for the strange feeling. Shinso, go to sleep. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then Shinso's eyes closed and his breathing calmed. Neither Izuku or Ida said anything, not wanting to wake up their friend. Izuku placed his hand on Shinso's forehead and returned the quirk before laying back down. He was holding back tears, this time tears of happiness for being able to help someone with his quirk, and that someone allowing him to. The only one to ever do that before was his mom. Izuku wiped his eyes on the edge of his blanket, hoping Ida didn't notice. He laid still, the silence of the large house only broken by the calm breathing of people who stayed there with him willingly. Izuku wished he could have told them everything, but had to settle with doing his best to help them pursue their dreams. After a tiring day he soon fell asleep, almost as fast as if he got brainwashed. Izuku stood in the middle of a street alone, his field of view filled by flames and a large green blob of sludge. His mother's head hung out of the sludge, struggling to breath as the villain squeezed her from outside and inside. There were heroes around. Izuku screamed at them to help, but they only saved people that were nowhere near the villain in the first place. Death Arms tried a single punch just for show, then went to pick up people who were already out of danger, able to just walk away on their own if they wanted, and carried them to a further distance, passing in front of the cameras to be sure they saw him acting heroically in quad. Izuku turned to face the villain and desperately clawed against the sludge to get to his mom, but it was futile. His mom suddenly snapped upwards and there was a loud crack. The world froze still, literary. Nothing moved except Izuku as he fell on his knees. Then the sludge was gone and he could really see his mother with all might standing right on top of him, arm raised as if he had achieved some great victory. Neither he nor the flashing cameras cared about the corpse or her son who was flooding the street. Midoriya, Izuku. Izuku's eyes jolted open. The towering rage-inducing form of All Might was replaced by two concerned faces hovering over Izuku's. His rapid breathing slowly calmed back to normal as the two gave him space without leaving the side of his bed. Izuku brought his hand to his forehead, biting his teeth together. Don't tell me I had the nightmare and woke you up. I could, but I already said friends shouldn't lie so it would be hypocritical, Shinso said. You were shouting about your mom and telling someone to help her, something about people supposing to be heroes, and you were just about to say something about All Might when Shinso woke you up, Ida added. I saw her death, Izuku admitted. I wasn't even there but I keep getting dreams several times a week witnessing it. What and quad? Shinso started but fell silent as Ida raised his hand and shook his head. He looked at Izuku. I know your mother's death is a difficult topic and you don't want to talk about it. We won't make you. Izuku lowered his hand and stared at the two. After a long silence he sniffed and reached over his head to get his phone. His hands began shaking as he pulled up the video saved in the phone. The screen was still cracked as reminder from when he first saw the video. He handed the phone to Ida and pulled a pillow over his face, covering his ears with his hands. He could still hear the muffled sounds of the video and his friends talking. He stayed like that until the pillow, already soaked, was pulled from his face and a dry one was put under his head. Shinso leaned over him. Izuku, he whispered. Yes Hitoshi. Izuku's thoughts became foggy as the brainwashing took over. Go back to sleep Izuku, Hitoshi commanded and there was nothing Izuku could have done to resist even if he wanted to. At the last second, he realized he had wanted to make Hitoshi fall asleep again after waking him up, but it was already too late as sleep took over. At least Hitoshi had used his power without needing to be convinced to. Despite the brainwashing Izuku's lips briefly twitched upwards. Chapter 15, The Villain Exam. Their training for the entrance exam was finally over as the happy, tired trio left their usual training spot. The entrance exams were only a few days away so whatever happened, they could take the next weekend off just to have fun. Unfortunately, they needed to see Hitoshi off for this weekend first, the worst part of every weekend for the past few months. It didn't help that they had worked up plenty of sweat and the February weather did not suit that well. Luckily one of them had blowtorches for hands when there weren't too many people or police close by. Even the ever law-abiding Tenya moved in closer to the heat, covering the fire from being seen in the process. Thank you, he said. Can't risk any of us getting sick right before the exams, Izuku said. At least Toshi is going to get into a warm train soon. And then the next time we meet is going to be at the entrance exams, Hitoshi said. I can barely believe it. The last couple of months have gone so fast, and thanks to you two I feel like I actually have a chance to get into the hero course. Maybe. I believe you will, unless they really go out of their way to discriminate against your quirk, Izuku said. The reason I applied at UA is to keep our group together. But we don't even go to the same school now, Hitoshi reminded. And we only meet during weekends, Izuku shot back. Though it did give a good excuse to have you stay over some nights. I hope you will do that even if we go to the same school, or even the same class. There are some people who we might come across at UA, and I will need some friendly faces around if we do. Are you talking about Bakugo? Tenya asked. To think someone like him could be accepted into UA. Yeah, Izuku answered. Unfortunately his quirk and fighting talents are no joke, and he is smart enough to pass written exams. I'd be surprised if he didn't get in. Surely UA would vet hero students better than that, Tenya insisted. They might ask for records from the previous school, but I wouldn't trust Aldera's records. They didn't bother intervening with him. I doubt they recorded anything their prize student did. Sometimes ... and quad. Izuku paused for a moment. His fires disappeared. Sometimes I wish the sludge villain killed him instead of mom. The trio stopped as Izuku confessed his feelings. That wasn't a very heroic thing to say, Tenya said, though I can understand where it came from. A bit. Izuku sighed and kept walking as Hitoshi and Tenya kept up with him. I have never pretended to be a hero. Well, not in many years, Izuku answered. Tenya opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't. Don't let Tenya scare you. You can say what you feel, Hitoshi said, and if the exams go well, you won't be dealing with Mr. Boom Boom alone. Izuku chuckled. Are you trying to come up with ways to provoke him into falling for your quirk? Maybe. Because if you actually say that to his face, I'll make Dad pay for the funeral. Hitoshi and Tenya both stared at him with some shock, especially Hitoshi. Izuku looked at them with a blank stare. Slowly Hitoshi started chuckling and it turned out to be contagious. Yeah, Izuku said when they calmed down. His tone became more serious. I was only partially joking. He has gotten physically violent many times, especially before my quirk manifested. Considering how much stronger he must have gotten since then, you should be careful around him. 10 might be fast enough to get out of the way, but Toshi, you aren't. 10? Tenya asked. Is that what you picked for him? Hitoshi asked with a grin. Izuku rubbed his chin. I thought I did, but it doesn't sound right, not as good as Toshi. Tenya's name is hard that way. Unlike yours. Izu, or did you prefer Zuku? Shinso teased. Please no, Izuku pleaded. Those sound too cutesy, like we were dating or something. This isn't some love story. I didn't buy 3 beds to share one with you. No offense. How could I ever take offense on my dear Izu? Hitoshi teased. That made all of them smirk, until they turned a corner and saw the station. Izuku's mood quickly dropped. He turned to face Hitoshi. See you at the exams. Try to sleep before then, Toshi, or I'll take your quirk and make you sleep till the next semester starts. Is that supposed to be a threat? Because it sounds great, Hitoshi responded. Well, I should hurry. The train is leaving. Don't miss it for us, Tenya added, and the trio separated. Izuku was left with Tenya. He checked his watch. Can you get home without freezing? He asked Tenya. I need to run some errands. Don't worry about me. See you tomorrow at school. Hey, watch where you are walking. Oh look, this guy wants a fight. You seem to struggle just standing straight. A trio of shady-looking young men, probably on drugs, were standing in front of Hitoshi, seemingly having come from an alleyway next to them and made Hitoshi evade, ready to counterattack like Izuku had trained him. 2 of the 3 were walking around Hitoshi to trap him. The apparent ringleader held his fingers together and his hand formed into a metallic-looking blade he held up towards Hitoshi's neck. You must be very sorry about getting in our way. Maybe enough to pay us as an apology and get away with only little pain. And quat. He raised the blade into a strike. Would be a shame if someone had to tell your mom you. He stopped to scream as an arrow of flame struck his transformed hand and had no time to even realize what was going on as Izuku's shoe met his chin. The walking corpse fell on his back, and before his fellow dead men could get involved, Izuku's dragon blade was already lit and moving towards the man's neck. Izuku, Hitoshi shouted. The blade stopped millimeters from the man's neck as Izuku was left on top of him, breathing hard, one little twitch away from taking a life. Slowly his stare hardened even as the man under him started trembling more. Tell his mom what? No. Nothing, it's just a big misunderstanding. Really, didn't look like it to me. Izuku wanted to say more, but at that moment a hand landed on his shoulder. Izuku, breathe, Hitoshi said. Let me talk to him. Izuku breathed in deep once and pulled his dragon blade further away from the man's neck. Do you want to live? Hitoshi asked the man. Of course. Hitoshi's quirk took hold of the man and his eyes glazed over, staring ahead into emptiness. Izuku got off him and checked the other 2. One was similarly staring into nothingness. Other was very consciously staring at his brainwashed co-criminals, looking terrified and restrained by Tenya. Izuku focused on him with a stare that still promised death if he made a single wrong move while pointing at Hitoshi. My friend will talk to you, and you will respond, or I will find a more painful way to finish this. The last thug nodded several times in a few seconds, and a moment later all 3 were standing next to the wall staring into nothingness. Izuku could focus on Hitoshi. Are you okay? Yes, I would be more worried for you. Hitoshi's expression turned sterner. Izuku, it looked like you were going to. He was going to attack you. Izuku. Were you going to? Hitoshi paused. Kill him? Izuku looked away and at the ground, unwilling to face either of his friends. Maybe. It all went so quickly. I was only focused on how to take him down. Can't even remember anything else before you stopped me. A police car curved on the street, siren screaming. Izuku picked up his phone. Not a good time to talk about it. I'll handle this situation. He had a lawyer on the phone before the police stopped to find criminals standing in line ready to be arrested. The whole thing took a while to settle, but at least they didn't get arrested for illegal quirk use. Yes, Izuku saving his friend from getting stabbed and Hitoshi non-violently restraining the criminals was bigger concern to the police than actually taking the scum away. In the end, Hitoshi only missed 2 trains, and with Tenya walking home, Izuku was left alone, for just a moment. He had to hurry. He left the station and walked until he found an empty alley with enough cover from curious eyes. After sending a quick text with coordinates, a vortex of dark mist appeared in front of him, forming into a warp gate. In a few steps he was back at his usual training room, sweating even more after suddenly transferring into a much warmer space. I need to wash and get changed. Please be quick, young Shigaraki. You don't want to be late. With you it would be hard too, Izuku remarked and walked out towards the shower room. There were no long baths with friends here, and in less than 10 minutes he was already placing his helmet on. He glanced at a mirror before leaving the dressing room. He literally looked like an officer to an army of shadows. How would Hitoshi and Tenya react to seeing him like that? Izuku sighed. Maybe he wasn't meant to have pure happiness without the danger and lies of living two parallel lives. At least both sides of his life now had something, some people, to live for. Izuku smiled under his helmet as he returned to the training room where Kurogiri was still waiting. As long as he could keep these 4 people, including the Nomu, safe and happy, he could be happy. Whether it was pure or not hardly mattered. Are you ready? Kurogiri asked and handed Izuku a suitcase. Yes, let's get this done. Dad doesn't like if I'm late for the evening training. He's planning something special before the entrance exams. Kurogiri didn't even make a move, but a warp gate appeared next to him. In an instant they were on a parking lot full of trucks. It was a good place to hide stuff while keeping it easily transportable, and no one was hanging around there, especially after sundown. Izuku didn't delude himself by assuming no one could see him though, and made sure to stand straight, not allowing any uncertainty into his body language. The one exception to keeping appearances was when he talked to Kurogiri, making sure to not order or demand anything. Kurogiri, could you go somewhere where you can look over me from a distance? Yes. The word was barely said as Izuku felt the Nomu's presence disappear. He checked the communication system of his helmet and stayed still until he heard a car approaching slowly. The car stopped for just long enough for a man to step out before continuing away. Izuku stepped out from between the trucks to face the middle-aged man with eyeglasses and a lit tobacco hanging from his mouth. Hiron, I assume, Izuku said, his voice altered by the helmet. And you would be Shigaraki, I hear? Hiron responded. One of us, yes. I figured. That helmet would be quite a change of style from a hand on your face. You are thinking about my brother. I trust you don't have a problem dealing with me instead. Nope. At least not based on first impressions. I heard your brother can be bratty. I am glad to deal with someone more mature. I have acquired the first batch of the materials you requested, if you have my payment. I have, Izuku said and opened the suitcase. It was filled with money and a flash drive with confidential data on new support items his father had acquired. I'm guessing you've hidden your products in one of these trucks. Yes. Oh, I love dealing with bright individuals, at least after the price has been negotiated, Hiron said. Though that comes with some interesting requests. Usually people want weapons, support items, or even new recruits. Advanced medical research equipment and strange chemicals are something else. I've been told you are good at keeping your client information secret, but don't try to pry for information you don't need. The League is interested in dealing with you again in the future, including for those more conventional purchases, so long as you mind only what you need to know. Sounds good to me. This way. And quat. Hiron turned around and led Izuku past a row of trucks, seemingly not even paying attention to where he was going as he chatted with Izuku. I've been hoping to meet you for a while, well, not you personally, but I have heard whispers of this league of yours for a while, and about your brother. Many people that have talked about you seem to pass you as couple of crazies who have managed to gather a small army of small timers with big promises, but seems there is more than meets the eye, and I don't just mean there being 2 Shigarakis, although one just appeared recently. Did you just get into the game or have you worked under a different name? Izuku deemed it best to remain quiet rather than risk trying to come up with an appropriate response, voice changer or not. Hiron had already figured too much. Izuku didn't want to unintentionally give him more information. Hiron waited for a moment before giving up on that question. Do you even have a name? I go by Shirakuro Shigaraki, Izuku responded. I can see the black. Where is the white? The casket. Izuku gave the first part of the response he had thought up ahead of time for his role as Shirakuro, black and white. The casket? Hiron asked just as planned. The one you will be cremated in if you fail our trust. Ah, I see where you got the name. Hiron stopped. We are here. He turned behind a truck next to them and opened its rear to reveal several large liquid containers and a large amount of advanced-looking scientific and medical machinery. Izuku had no doubts that they were for the doctor to create more Nomus, though some might be used to help his father. For that alone Izuku had to complete his mission. He grabbed the side of the truck and leapt on board with a single fluid motion. His helmet had the list of things that were supposed to be there, so the only problem was recognizing the devices listed on his HUD. Without night vision it would have been impossible. Everything seems to be in order, but we will see how they actually work. Just need to be transported now. I can have the truck delivered in any location within 100 kilometers and left alone long enough to be emptied. That won't be necessary, Izuku responded and jumped off the truck. His helmet's inbuilt radio had been active since the beginning. It is all here. You can pick it up. Hiron blinked, looking at him curiously, but Izuku only handed him the suitcase and raised his other hand to point into the open truck. A large warp gate had already opened and was spreading dark mist across the space. Kurogiri's voice came from inside it. It will take a moment to transport this much, young Shigaraki. That's fine, Izuku responded. You're still faster than anyone else. Don't stress your quirk unnecessarily. Well, isn't that nice? Hiron said. Most people in this business don't treat their people that softly. He is one of the few people I can count on with irreplaceable abilities. Why would I treat him anything but well? You are an interesting person. I suspect the darkness of this world will either tear you apart or learn to fear you. Izuku saw it best not to answer so as not to feed the man's interest or risk saying anything he would regret. This man was perceptive. Meanwhile, Izuku hadn't been able to find out much more than that about him. He had a lot to learn. Either way, if you need gear or people, you know who to call, as long as you can afford to pay. I'll remember that, Izuku responded, and at the last moment had another thought. Tomura would be livid if he found out though. If you want a tip, you should be ready when the league starts getting more attention and see if you can identify anyone whose interests might align. The league is growing in numbers but could use a few more carefully chosen, powerful individuals interested in changing this country. That sounds like you have big plans. I will keep your tip in mind. Seems your friend is finished. Izuku glanced at the truck where Kurogiri now stood in the otherwise empty space. Hiron walked past Izuku. Close the door after yourself, will ya? I'll wait for your next contact. Izuku stood in place quietly until he was sure Hiron had left and gotten far enough away. Kurogiri stepped down from the truck and waited quietly next to him. Still not saying a word, Izuku pulled the door closed. There was no sign of anyone nearby. Time to go, he finally said. I shall send you straight to Master as he requested. Izuku nodded in response. A warp gate opened in front of him, and he stepped in. Remember to always be aware of your surroundings, Kurogiri said just as Izuku stepped through the gate. What? He stepped into the usual training room. There was movement on his side and he jumped out of the way just in time before a hand struck through the space he had just occupied, brushing against the protective fabric of his sleeve. It was a hand with elongated, sharp nails, from what he could observe. He didn't have time for anything else as the owner of the hand charged at him again, striking and slashing at a great speed. Izuku barely dodged the barrage and got a tiny bit of breathing room when the sharp-nailed hand struck a shield of fire. The yelp of pain was the first sound the woman had made. Izuku just breathed audibly. He didn't have energy for this after a day of training. With a few steps to put some space between him and his attacker, Izuku could finally worry about what was going on. How had this woman gotten inside and why? Was his father okay? Izuku didn't recognize the woman as any hero he knew of either. He turned a bit as he evaded a new attack and finally noticed his father in a dark corner of the room. He brought the shield up to deflect another strike, but this time the attacking woman was prepared and pulled her hand back, then jumped back when Izuku slashed at her with a flaming blade stretched to its max length. Dad, what is going on? Your exam. Despite all of the training you've had, you have never experienced a true battle with another human. To the end. Better do that here to harden you in case you have to face the same out there. Are you kidding? Do I joke about these things? This is the minimum requirement just to be capable of surviving in this world and completing your missions. And quad. As All for One spoke, the woman started attacking Izuku again, making paying attention to his father quite difficult. Your opponent is not in here out of her own free will. I gave her only two options, kill and be rewarded or be killed. She won't hold anything back. You have to kill her to stop her. You told her to kill me? Izuku shouted as he slashed at the woman again. She was slippery and flexible like an eel and had managed to avoid every strike Izuku had thrown at her, including a hellfire arrow. Yes, not that she could. Also, you used the wrong quirks, so I wouldn't let her get away if I were you. Izuku cursed internally, and right as he was distracted the woman struck. Her unnaturally long and sharp nails cut into Izuku's wrist right between the sleeve and glove, drawing a surprised yelp from Izuku, but the cut was nothing compared to what came next. A burning agony radiated through Izuku's arm that fell down completely lax. The pain quickly spread throughout his body as all of his limbs failed and he collapsed into a twitching mess on the floor. The burning had spread all across his body like his very blood was boiling. He couldn't shout, just whine quietly. The only things working properly were his eyes, and even those felt hot. The woman stood over him with a manic, outright bloodthirsty grin. You might not be a quirkless monkey, but I still love it when people keep twitching like fish out of water. Oh right, his father said with an exaggerated high tone. I forgot to introduce her. This lovely lady is known as Yui. You might have heard of her in the news. Likes to torture and kill quirkless people. Those monkeys are like an anchor holding back the evolution of humanity, Yui said. I think it's only fair I get to have some fun with them while working to clean the gene pool. My venomous nails paralyze them, and when I get tired of letting the venom cause all the pain, I might make some art out of them. You actually remind me of a kid I dealt with a few weeks back. With every word Yui said, Izuku felt such a mix of disgust and rage, he barely noticed the pain anymore. Now isn't that interesting, Shirakuro? His father said to him. Can you see why I picked her? Imagine all she will do with her quirk after leaving here if you lose. Slowly seething, Izuku realized it wasn't just his anger. The pain, as bad as it wasn't as paralyzingly bad as before. He tried wiggling his toes. He has already lost, Yui said and stepped closer to Izuku, raising her hand, fingers and their nails extended. Even with that scratch he will be paralyzed for a few more minutes. Last chance to change your mind on making me kill and quat. She screamed in pain as a blade of fire pierced straight through her calf. In a second Izuku pushed himself off the ground, pulled his feet back under him and bounced up to deliver an uppercut with every ounce of strength in his body. The monster in front of him somehow held her balance for a moment and her hand was already approaching Izuku. There wasn't even time to consider options of what to do. There was only enough time to activate his quirk. A hand hit the ground an instant before its owner's back. Screaming, Yui was holding the scorched stump of her right hand with her left. The nails of her remaining hand dripped a little bit of their poison as she gripped her damaged arm, but most people were immune to their own quirk. Grimacing from the pain, Izuku grabbed her remaining arm with one hand and slammed the other against her face. Of course, it wasn't that easy. She was flexible enough to kick Izuku back even from that position, and even after all of Izuku's training, her strength was nothing to ignore, especially when she started panicking. Izuku hardly distinguished all that from the pain he was already feeling. She was so tense and unconsciously resisting Izuku's all-for-one that it couldn't have been pleasant to her either, alongside the dismemberment of course. Soon Izuku's pain waned away while Yui's resistance grew equally fiercer. She was actually using her cut stump of an arm to punch Izuku, who was glad for his helmet. She was still fighting with her remaining fingers extended, but when they hit Izuku's hand it was just a poke. Her nails had shrunk to a normal size and the attack only hurt her own fingers. She finally stopped moving, staring at Izuku in horror. How do you like being quirkless? Izuku asked coldly, no longer the least bit worried for his safety. He took off one of his gloves and with some focus was able to find the quirk within himself. His nails slowly grew longer and stronger and he could feel the venom building up under them. He made sure to show them to Yui while lighting a dragon blade on the other. With vibration applied to it he was actually using 3 quirks. It's time to finish this, son, his father said. You wouldn't want for her to get away with what she now knows. Izuku froze. If his father intended to encourage him to act, it had backfired. Izuku hesitated. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just. Yui's stare turned from horror to one of desperation and she bounced with a scream, going straight for Izuku's throat. He dodged it almost as easily as Hitoshi's attacks but also swung forward with his blade as he had trained to do with the Nomus. The scream ended with a gasp. The hand that had reached for Izuku fell down and both their eyes turned down where the dragon blade went in through Yui's chest and out of her back. Her legs failed and as she fell forward the blade kept cutting until it came out of Yui's shoulder and she slumped on the floor. Izuku stepped back. His quirks disappeared from his shaking hands. He fell on his knees in front of the corpse, gasping for air. The only thing that stopped him from vomiting was the inbuilt gas mask in his helmet. He could only imagine the stench of the burnt flesh and blood. An arm landed on his shoulders. Another circled behind his back and pulled him against another body and up from the ground. You did well. I am sorry, but this was necessary to prepare you for the world we exist in. Now you are ready, his father whispered while carrying Izuku. Izuku's gasping breath turned into whimpering as tears started blurring his vision. Kurogiri, his father commanded, and darkness encased them. Chapter 17. A new problem child, Shota Aizawa, also known as the Pro-Hero Eraserhead, arrived at the principal's office of UA High School. He was a teacher, so it was not anything unusual, but what awaited him inside was. Principal Nezu was there of course, but so was their newest teacher All Might, in his small form, and the school nurse Recovery Girl. Most concerning was the individual present who was not part of the school staff, though still a familiar face, Police Detective Tsukuchi. Aizawa made sure he closed the door properly. Thank you for coming, Aizawa. There is a matter we need to discuss before the start of the new term. Is it about one of my new students? Aizawa asked and glanced at Detective Tsukuchi. Or is one of my current ones suspected of a crime? Considering the admission papers on the table, I am guessing you are investigating a new student and plan to have him or her in my class since Vlad isn't here. You are correct, Principal Nezu said. There are some special concerns considering one of our new students that we want to approach carefully, for his benefit as well as investigatory concerns. As far as school staff is concerned, only those present and Hound Dog as the counselor are involved in discussing the topic. Nezu paused, a serious expression crossing his face before continuing. Tell me, how much do you know about All for One? Aizawa tensed. His former tired and slightly annoyed demeanor disappeared, replaced by a focused stare and a frown. Probably more than most heroes in my age group, especially public heroes, let alone civilians. Back when I graduated, he was said to still control most organized crime in the country, but there were no real sightings for several years even before I became a hero. I don't think I have heard anything but old legends about him for years. That is because I defeated and killed him 6 years ago, All Might said. That is where I got my injuries. Heroes aren't supposed to kill people, you know, Izuku commented. Maybe so, All Might said, but he is different. As an underground hero, you of all people should know that we can't always be the way people expect heroes to act. True. Now, how does this relate to my students? A major reason All for One could gain such power was his quirk, an unique ability to take and give others quirks, essentially the ability to hoard or redistribute power in the society as he saw fit, Nezu stated. He handed Izuku one of the admission papers with student information and put footage of the practical exam on a large screen hanging on the wall of his office. It was showing a teen with thick white hair, impressive physical ability, and a fire-based quirk. That quirk is no longer unique. Another person has emerged with seemingly the same abilities. Izuku Midoriya scored the highest score in the Hero Course practical exam and will be attending your class. Are you sure he has the same quirk? Izuku asked. Yes, I was lucky to meet him at an educational fair a few months back. He stood up for another student he didn't even know being bullied for his quirk and later admitted to me what his real quirk could do, though he was hesitant to do so. The official quirk registries support this also, though they refer to it as quirk transfer and only registered his quirk when he was 13. So, Izuku started, if that is the case, where did the fire quirk come from? Seems like something we should at least question before admitting him. Do you think I haven't already done that? Nezu responded. According to Midoriya, someone with that quirk attempted to kidnap him, so he took the quirk in self-defense. This let him get away, but he didn't tell people at the time due to prejudice he has experienced because of his quirk. That is what he said anyway. Detective Tsukuchi has been investigating the matter while checking on the boy's background. Detective? Unfortunately, the conclusion of my investigation isn't as conclusive as I would like. I have identified a known criminal with a fire-based quirk similar to his, at least in basic form. It seems he has been able to advance the quirk quite a bit, from the look of things even during your exams. Unfortunately, I have been unable to confirm this man is truly the origin of the quirk. In other words, you haven't managed to be in contact with this person. No, Tsukuchi responded. It seems no one has seen him in nearly a year. Same goes for several known acquaintances. It is unclear if they are on the run for some crime or worse. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find more, especially while staying discreet. I'm afraid it is the same with the other investigation. I have not found a connection with All for One, the person, but I also couldn't completely rule it out. Considering his age, there could be a connection several generations back that could be impossible to identify even if I had good information, and I don't. His father Hisashi Midoriya especially is a mystery. He seems to have familial connections to the United States and has spent much of his and his son's life working there. Unfortunately, that limits what I can do, especially in secret and without any evidence of a crime. So, his father lives abroad. And how about the mother? Izuku asked. Both Tsukuchi's and All Might's expressions darkened. The mother Inko Midoriya was killed by a villain last spring. It was my fault, All Might said. He got away from me earlier that day and I came too late to save Midoriya's mother. I didn't even realize who I was talking to when we met at that fair. He must hate me. Unfortunately, you are likely correct, Tsukuchi said. I talked with the police officers who were present when Izuku Midoriya was informed about his mother's death. He found a video of it online and threw his phone across the room, cursing the heroes when All Might arrived late. So he is one of, if not the most powerful quirk in the world that people naturally fear and hate, something that can really mess up your life in modern society. He witnessed his mother die due to the failure of the #1 hero, and his father is not even in the country most of the time, Izuku said, feeling a headache coming and pinched his nose. And we cannot completely rule out a family connection with All for One himself. That would seem to be the case, Tsukuchi confirmed. He even looks like All for One, All Might muttered, though maybe it's just the hair. Izuku glanced at All Might briefly before focusing on Nezu. I am surprised he is even applying at UA, Izuku concluded, with everything and everyone in his life apparently pushing him to become a villain. It's a near-perfect backstory to make a villain, and not because he shares a quirk with one. It certainly wasn't an easy decision for him, Nezu responded. Admitting to his quirk wasn't the only thing he hesitated to talk about when we met. Seems he had childhood dreams of becoming a hero that he lost. In fact, if I had to describe him when we met, I would say he was lost with no path forward that he really cared about. A precarious position to be in, especially for someone with so much potential. Luckily you are wrong about everyone pushing him to be a villain. Young Shinso and Ida appear to have helped him find his path toward being a hero. Shinso and Ida? Aizawa asked. I think I read their names on the admission lists. Correct, Nezu said and replaced the exam footage with what seemed like pictures of school security cameras. Every single one showed 3 boys, Midoriya and 2 others, one walking in through UA gates, one talking to an angry-looking boy while standing together, with Midoriya standing in front of his friends protectively, and one of the trio eating lunch together. In one picture Midoriya and one of his friends seemed to be asleep, leaning against each other while their taller friend sat next to them. Seems they stayed together all the time they were here, except when separated for the exams, and also left together. The taller of them is Tenya Ida, younger brother of the hero Ingenium with a similar engine quirk. He is coming from the same school as Midoriya. The other one is Hitoshi Shinso from a different school. As far as I can tell, they first met him at the education fair. He was the one being bullied for his quirk that Midoriya helped. And what is his quirk? Aizawa asked. It is called brainwashing. I am sure you can deduce what consequences that might have caused him. Yes, Aizawa admitted, and the design of the entrance exams in this school wouldn't help that. Actually, he passed, thanks to the hero points, Nezu said. Doesn't change my point. They were quiet for a moment before Nezu continued. I have placed all 3 of them together on your class. If those 2 convinced him to pursue heroics again, they are our best insurance to keep him on that path. I agree that keeping the 3 together is the best choice, Aizawa said, but I don't like how you keep talking about him like he was constantly on the edge of becoming another all-for-one. It is exactly that kind of attitudes that make it happening a threat. I know why you assign them to my class, but Midoriya needs a non-prejudiced guidance, not a security guard capable of erasing his quirks. As he spoke about guidance, Aizawa glanced at All Might. I just hope it isn't too late, he added. I agree with Aizawa. Recovery Girl joined the conversation. I have had some experience with bullied and abused people in the past. Based on what I have heard and seen so far, I would expect Midoriya to be wary and distrusting of people, especially teachers if the previous ones let things become as bad as Nezu has described. He is also likely to have sensitive topics you should watch your words around. You will be fighting an uphill battle even if you can share some similar experiences. That is part of the job description as a hero and teacher, Aizawa responded. Recovery Girl nodded. He is also likely very attached and protective to those few that have accepted him and earned his trust. That can help you if you win them over, but one mistake with either of them and you will be back on the starting line with Midoriya, or worse. Losing trust is much easier than earning it. Speaking of protective, Tsukuchi interrupted. There was one more incident that came up during my investigation. A few days before the entrance exam those 3 were involved in a confrontation with some street criminals, drugs, gang activity and such. Seems they ran into and threatened Shinso. When the police arrived, they were all standing against a wall brainwashed. Sounds like Shinso has hero potential, Aizawa noted. I cannot comment on that, but he didn't resolve the situation himself. Apparently Midoriya took one of them down in seconds. They swear he almost killed the man in rage. The man's chin was broken and there were severe burns on his hand. To be fair, he could turn that hand into a sword and was seeking to stab Shinso according to eyewitnesses. Impressive for a junior high student, Aizawa admitted, but legally questionable. That is what the police on scene thought, perhaps even too strongly, Tsukuchi admitted, but Midoriya had lawyers on the phone before they even arrived. Self-defense and quirk restriction laws are complex enough combination that with their young age there was no prosecution against Midoriya or Shinso. Also, one prosecutor resigned around the same time for unknown reasons. Them not being prosecuted is probably for the best, but the whole situation raises some concerns, Aizawa said. Seeking to protect is the core of being a hero, but how one approaches it is equally important. If Midoriya was truly close to inflicting greater injury or death, that is a major problem to consider. Speaking of which, are you still trying to investigate him? If opportunities come up, Tsukuchi answered. There isn't much more I can do inconspicuously or without a valid suspicion of a crime beyond possibly excessive self-defense. I cannot forcibly question Midoriya or use my quirk without some evidence of a crime. I have discussed with Nezu about holding guest lectures on criminal investigations and hero police cooperation to get around that. Don't destroy my hopes of teaching him by getting caught trying to trick him into being questioned with your quirk, Aizawa warned. Tsukuchi took a step back, facing his stare. He held his hands up defensively. Don't worry, it is not my first discreet investigation. Aizawa got up and looked at Nezu with tired eyes. If you are concerned that he might veer off the path of a hero, don't give him any reasons to do so and let me do my job. We are counting on you, Nezu responded. Without wasting any more words Aizawa got up and turned to leave. One more thing, Nezu said. Do not expel him. Aizawa waved his hand and left. In the corridor he read through the profile of Izuku Midoriya who was turning out to be his newest problem child. He had meant every word he told Nezu and the others, but couldn't deny that he wanted more information. Even with Recovery Girl's evaluation, he didn't really know how Midoriya's mental state was. He needed to learn about the kid without targeting him specifically. The first day would show him plenty. People tended to show more of their true nature under pressure, and that was Aizawa's specialty. Well, it seems like we've came to the end of part 5 too. What if Deku was a villain? Cough, cough, my worst My Hero Academia series, cough, cough. But anyways, let me get on to Sun and Moon Deku, so I hope all of you have a wonderful day/night, bye.